Hi, my name is Madison, and I'm 30 years old. If you'd asked me a few years ago what my biggest fear was, I might have said failure, or maybe being alone. But today, I know the real answer: being betrayed by someone who shares your blood. This isn't just a story about inheritance or money. It's about standing up to the person who should have protected me, but chose greed over love. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Oregon, in a modest two-story house with white shutters and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. My childhood wasn't filled with the usual warmth of bedtime stories or packed lunches from a loving mom. My mother left when I was just a toddler. I don't remember her face clearly. What I do remember is the firm but kind voice of my grandfather, Henry, my dad's father, who stepped in when no one else did. He was a former carpenter who had built his own construction company from the ground up, and though he wasn't rich in the way people think, he was rich in wisdom. Grandpa Henry taught me everything I know about life. He made my breakfast every morning, helped with homework every night, and told me that I was capable of doing anything as long as I stayed true to myself. He was my everything, my parent, my teacher, my protector. When I was 9, he built me a tree house in our backyard oak tree. "This is your thinking spot," he told me, wiping sweat from his brow. "When the world gets noisy, come up here and listen to the quiet." I did. A lot. Especially when my dad, Charles, dropped in every few months pretending to care, only to disappear again, chasing one get-rich-quick scheme after another. Charles had always been unreliable. He blamed everyone for his failures: his boss, his ex-wife, even me. He'd say I was too serious, too quiet, too much like Henry. He'd show up with excuses and leave with cash, always spinning stories about being close to turning his life around. But Grandpa never once let me feel unsafe. "Your father is lost, Madison," he'd say. "But you don't have to be." When I graduated high school, I tried going to college. I even got into Portland State to study business. But life, as it tends to do, got in the way. Scholarships didn't cover everything, and I was working 2 part-time jobs just to keep up. One night, I came home to find a disconnection notice on our apartment door. I broke down. I didn't tell Grandpa. He was already working overtime to keep the business afloat during the downturn. I dropped out quietly and got a job as a bookkeeper's assistant at a local manufacturing firm. 3 years later, when things had stabilized, Grandpa encouraged me to reapply. "Education never expires," he said. So I did. And I was halfway through my degree when the call came. I still remember the silence after the doctor's voice. "Stage 4 cancer." They said he had months. I moved back into the house immediately. Those final months were both a gift and a wound. I fed him, bathed him, managed his medicines, and we spent our evenings on the porch swing, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, he squeezed my hand and said, "Madison, I'm leaving everything to you. Not just because you cared for me, but because you'll protect what I built. Don't let your father get near it. Promise me." I promised. I meant it. But I had no idea how soon I'd have to fight to keep it. The day of Grandpa Henry's funeral was cold, gray, and hollow. I stood beside his casket dressed in black, my hands clenched tightly around a folded tissue I hadn't used. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't devastated, but because I had nothing left in me. I'd said my goodbyes during the long nights by his bedside, whispering memories and thank yous when he was too weak to speak. The church was filled with old friends from the construction world, neighbors, and a few distant relatives. My father, Charles, sat stiffly in the second row, wearing a suit he clearly hadn't worn in years and a face full of forced grief. He hugged me awkwardly after the service. I could smell the cologne and cheap aftershave masking whatever emotions he didn't have. "We need to talk," he whispered close to my ear. I didn't respond. I just nodded and pulled away. A week later, I found myself sitting across from Mr. Benson, Grandpa's longtime attorney, in his quiet, wood-paneled office. I recognized the worn leather chairs and the faint scent of old paper and coffee. Charles sat to my right, impatiently tapping his fingers on the armrest. His girlfriend Linda, dressed in an overly tight red blazer, sat beside him, pretending to be supportive but looking like she was evaluating how much she'd be getting. Mr. Benson adjusted his glasses and began reading Henry's will aloud. I listened carefully, though I already knew what it said. Grandpa had shown me a copy before his death. Still, hearing it formally made my heart ache all over again. To my son, Charles, I leave the sum of $50,000, which he may use however he chooses. To my granddaughter, Madison, I leave the remainder of my estate, including the family home, my investments, business assets, and personal belongings, valued at approximately $1.8 million. I do this with full knowledge of my son's expectations and past behavior, and I make this decision with a sound and clear mind. The room went silent. Then, boom. Charles slammed his fist against the table. "This is crap," he shouted, his face turning red. "Dad wouldn't do this to me. He was manipulated. She manipulated him." Linda leaned in dramatically. "He was on medication. Are we really going to pretend he was thinking straight when he wrote that?" Mr. Benson remained completely unfazed. "Actually," he said, pulling out a USB drive from a locked drawer, "Mr. Mitchell recorded a video 6 months before his diagnosis, while in perfect health, explaining the reasons behind his will. It is legally admissible and has already been filed with the probate court." Charles sat back, visibly rattled. "I didn't say a word. I didn't need to." Then Mr. Benson turned to me and handed over a sealed envelope. Grandpa's handwriting. My heart tightened. I waited until I got home before opening it. "Madison, I've given your father more chances than I can count. Money, second starts, bailouts. Over the years, I gave him more than $300,000 to clean up his messes, and not once did he change. You, on the other hand, gave without ever asking for anything. I'm proud of you, and I trust you to do good with what I've built. This isn't about fairness. It's about doing what's right. Protect it. And protect yourself. I love you always. Henry." I clutched the letter to my chest, tears finally breaking free. I wasn't rich. I was responsible now for his legacy, his trust, and my future. But something deep in my gut told me this wasn't over. Not even close. It started with a phone call 3 days after the will was read. I was sorting through Grandpa Henry's old toolbox when my phone buzzed with Charles's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey, Maddie," he said, his voice unusually soft. "I've been thinking, about everything. I wanted to say, maybe we could sit down and figure things out. Like family." I stayed silent. Then came the real reason for the call. "It's just, Linda's car broke down," he added casually. "We're stuck with repairs and short on rent. Maybe you could help us out? Just until I get back on my feet." There it was. "I can help you look at the car if it's really in bad shape," I offered, my voice flat. "Maybe I can refer a mechanic." Silence. Then he scoffed. "You're unbelievable. You wouldn't even be living in that house if it weren't for me. You think this money is yours." He hung up. That was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I started receiving texts and voicemails from unfamiliar numbers. Different tones, same message. "Your father deserves more. Don't be selfish. It's only fair." I found out Linda had reached out to extended family members, spinning a carefully crafted lie that Grandpa had been manipulated, that he was mentally declining, and I had taken advantage of the situation. My phone became a battlefield. My cousin Grace was the only one who believed me fully, sending me screenshots of the messages they were spreading in group chats. One of them read, "She's hoarding all that money like she earned it. Charles is her father, and Henry was his dad too. It should be shared." Then the fraud attempt. One afternoon, I got a call from my bank's fraud department. Someone had tried opening a new credit card in my name, using my social security number, but with a different mailing address. When the agent read the address out loud, my stomach dropped. It was Charles's address. I confronted him. He denied everything, of course. Claimed someone must have spoofed his address. That he didn't even know my SS, except he did. Grandpa had listed me as next of kin years ago, and Charles had once seen the emergency contact paperwork. My trust crumbled. I filed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus the same day. I locked down my credit, changed my passwords, even bought a fireproof safe for important documents. I was no longer just protecting Grandpa's legacy. I was protecting myself from the man who had helped bring me into this world. And just when I thought I could take a breath, it got worse. A week later, I was in a meeting at work when Lindsay, our receptionist, came into the conference room and whispered, "Your dad's in the lobby. He says it's an emergency." My heart dropped. When I stepped out, I found him standing by the front desk, yelling loud enough for the whole office to hear. "I want to speak to my daughter. She's got my inheritance and won't even return my calls." I froze. My boss, Jessica, came to my side. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. "No," I said quietly, "but I'll take care of it." Security was called. Charles was escorted out. I went back into the meeting shaking, humiliated, my coworkers too polite to say anything, but their eyes said enough. That night, I sat in my living room with Grace on the phone. I told her everything. "I think he's going to try something bigger," I said. "I think you're right," she whispered. "Be careful. He's not just desperate, he's angry. And angry men do dangerous things." The attack didn't stay private for long. 2 days after the office incident, I opened Facebook and felt my stomach turn. My father, Charles, had posted a lengthy public status update filled with half-truths and outright lies. The post was titled, "Betrayed by my own daughter." He painted himself as a grieving son abandoned by his only child, claiming I had stolen his rightful inheritance and turned the family against him. He included photos of Grandpa Henry and even an old childhood picture of me. Used to draw sympathy. Comments flooded in. "She took advantage of an old man? That's sick. No one should turn on their father like that. $1.8 million must be nice to have no soul." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Mr. Benson had warned me about this. "Don't engage publicly," he said. "Screenshots are evidence. Silence is protection." So instead, I saved everything. Grace, my cousin, went to battle for me in the comments. "You all weren't there," she wrote. "Madison cared for Grandpa when no one else did. Not even Charles. Don't believe every sad story someone posts online." But the damage was done. Old friends began to distance themselves. Family members stopped answering calls. I had to deactivate my social media accounts entirely. It felt like I was being erased from my own life. Then came the invitation. A red envelope arrived at my front door with gold trim and a printed note inside. The handwriting was elegant and careful, definitely not Charles's. It was from Aunt Laura, inviting me to the family Christmas party at her home. The message read, "Just family, just dinner. Let's bring peace back to the table this holiday. Everyone's coming. I'd love to see you. Love, Aunt Laura." At first, I wanted to rip it in half. But then I thought of Grace, who messaged later that day. "I'll be there. If anything's off, I'll have your back. Just be smart." Still, something didn't sit right with me. Charles had been too quiet lately. And Linda? Silent as a shadow. It didn't add up. I decided I'd go, but I wouldn't go unprepared. I placed a small legal recorder in my purse. I reviewed Oregon's one-party consent law again to be sure. I was legally allowed to record the conversation as long as I was part of it. Then I sent Grace a message with Laura's address and wrote, "If you don't hear from me by 9 p.m., call me. If I don't answer, call the police." I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving, wearing Grandpa's old watch on my wrist like armor. Whatever they were planning, I wasn't walking in blind. A light snow had just begun to fall when I pulled up outside Aunt Laura's house that evening. Her home looked festive and warm, twinkling lights around the windows, a wreath on the front door, and the faint glow of a fireplace inside. From the outside, everything felt normal, comforting even. But I knew better. The driveway was crowded. Too crowded for just family. I spotted Charles's black SUV, Linda's silver Lexus, and 2 unfamiliar sedans. My heart pounded. Grace's car wasn't there yet. I considered turning back, but then I heard Grandpa Henry's voice in my mind. Running from trouble only gives it a head start. I inhaled deeply and rang the bell. Aunt Laura opened the door with a wide, slightly strained smile. "Madison, I'm so glad you came." She pulled me into a tight hug, whispering, "I didn't know it would be like this. I promise." Inside, the house looked lovely, table set with fine china, the smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey in the air, carols playing low in the background. But the moment I stepped into the living room, everything went silent. Sitting on the couch were Charles and Linda, flanked by two people in tailored suits. One was a sharp-jawed man in his 50s. The other, a woman with icy eyes and a stiff posture. I recognized them immediately from the last will meeting. Mr. Benson and Ms. Lawson, their new legal team. "Maddie," Charles said smoothly, rising to greet me. "We're so glad you could make it. This is just a quick chat, nothing serious." I didn't respond. I simply sat down where Aunt Laura pointed, clutching my purse tightly. The recorder was on. The holiday dinner was served, but no one touched their plates. Fake small talk circled the table, empty laughter and forced smiles. It felt like being trapped in a snow globe of tension. Then, as dessert was cleared, Charles put down his fork and said, "We've all been under a lot of pressure since Dad passed. And I think we can agree that things would be smoother if everyone just had a fair share." Mr. Benson opened a leather folder and slid several documents across the table toward me. "These are papers to form a family trust," Ms. Lawson explained. "All assets will be managed by a neutral trustee, your father, with fair distribution." Linda smiled like she was already spending the money. I glanced at the documents. They were written in dense legal language, but it didn't take a genius to figure out. I was being asked to sign away everything. The house, the money, the investments, in exchange for distributions approved by Charles. I looked up slowly. "This is a joke, right?" Charles leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Don't be difficult. This is what Dad would have wanted. He wasn't thinking straight when he made that will." I raised one eyebrow. "You mean the will backed by a video? Filed with the probate court? The one where he specifically said he was of sound mind?" Silence. "I think you should read the documents carefully," Ms. Lawson said, her voice tightening. "These conversations can get expensive if lawyers have to be involved in court." I reached into my purse and placed the blinking recorder on the table. "I think this conversation already is expensive," I said calmly. "And also very illegal if you're hoping to coerce me." Their faces froze. "I've been recording since I arrived," I added. "And in Oregon, I'm fully allowed to." Then I pulled out Grandpa Henry's letter, unfolded it slowly, and read aloud. "I do this with full knowledge of my son's expectations and past behavior, due to his financial irresponsibility and disregard for family obligations." Linda shot up from her seat. "This is outrageous." Charles stood too, face red. "You're making a mistake, Madison. You don't walk away from family." I stood with him, meeting his eyes without blinking. "You already did a long time ago." As I turned to leave, Aunt Laura grabbed my hand gently. "I didn't know they'd ambush you like this," she whispered. "You did the right thing." The cold air outside bit at my face, but it felt cleaner than the stifling heat in that room. I had walked into their trap, and walked right out with my head held high. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Goldstein's law office, Grandpa's original estate attorney. His secretary took one look at my face and ushered me straight in. I didn't even sit down before launching into everything. The Christmas party ambush, the documents, the fake trust, the threats, the recorder. He listened silently, occasionally jotting notes with his gold fountain pen. When I finished, he nodded slowly and said, "Madison, you did everything right." That small sentence made me feel more seen than 1,000 online affirmations. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Your grandfather anticipated this," he said. "It's why we included the video, and it's why there's a clause in the will. If Charles contests it or tries to coerce you, his $50,000 is automatically donated to charity. Specifically, a local children's hospital. That's already on file." I blinked. Grandpa really had thought of everything. Mr. Goldstein continued, "We'll file a cease and desist letter today. And I'd recommend we initiate a restraining order as well. Legally, this isn't just harassment anymore. It's attempted coercion, possibly fraud, and certainly emotional distress." That afternoon, I stood before a family court judge with Mr. Goldstein beside me. We presented the evidence. The audio recording of the party, screenshots of Charles's public posts, the credit fraud incident, the workplace ambush, and the will, video, and private letter. The judge was blunt. This is a clear attempt to pressure the petitioner into surrendering legally inherited assets. A temporary restraining order is granted, effective immediately. That night, back at home, I sat in silence. My mind replayed everything. Grandpa's death, the ambush, the lies, the fake family smiles, Charles's venom laced in fake kindness. I'd fought back, yes, but the emotional wreckage clung to me like smoke after fire. I started therapy the following week with a local trauma counselor, Dr. Williams. She was calm, gentle, and precise in her approach. After just one session, she said, "Madison, what you're experiencing isn't weakness. It's survival mode. When those meant to protect us become predators, our entire sense of safety collapses." She was right. Sleep didn't come easily. I jumped at every knock on the door. I began checking the peephole 5 times before opening it. I even stopped using my front nameplate in the mailbox. Then something terrifying happened. I hosted an open house to sell Grandpa Henry's old woodworking equipment. He had wanted his tools to go to young tradesmen, and I was honoring that. But halfway through the open house, while I was showing a couple one of his vintage saws in the garage, Linda appeared in the doorway. Her face was flushed, and she wasn't alone. Charles was behind her. "You think you can run this like a damn museum?" she shouted, stepping in. "None of this is yours." A neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Charles and Linda were escorted off the property, violating the restraining order. That added criminal charges to the mix. After that, I decided, enough was enough. I packed up everything of Grandpa's that mattered. The old reading chair, his journals, his war medals, and that quilt Grandma made when he returned from deployment. I sold the house to a kind couple with a baby on the way. They reminded me of everything my family never was: stable, gentle, whole. I used part of the investment funds to buy a secure condo downtown. No memories, no threats, just fresh paint, clean lines, and peace. I had left behind more than a house. I had closed the door on a lifetime of inherited trauma and opened one to a life I would now build myself. The first morning in my new condo was surreal. Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I brewed coffee in my tiny modern kitchen, wrapped myself in Grandpa's old quilt, and sat at the desk I'd brought from his office, the one where he first taught me to balance accounts. In that moment, I didn't feel like someone who had lost. I felt like someone who had endured. That same day, I filed the final paperwork to launch my business. Mitchell Financial Services, named after Grandpa Henry, of course. A boutique accounting firm for small construction businesses, tradesmen, and contractors, the kinds of people Grandpa always respected. The kinds of people who built the world with their hands and rarely got the financial guidance they deserved. My first 5 clients were all referrals from Grandpa's old contacts, contractors who remembered the man who always paid fair and treated them like partners. They said, "If you're anything like your grandfather, we trust you." Those words meant everything. The second bedroom in my condo became my office. I placed Grandpa's photo on the shelf above the monitor. In it, he stood with one foot on a beam of an unfinished roof, hammer in hand, grinning like a teenager. His fishing hat hung beside the window, a quiet reminder that rest mattered just as much as work. To honor him publicly, I created something more. The Henry Mitchell Scholarship Fund, dedicated to trade school students pursuing carpentry, plumbing, welding, and other skilled professions. The first scholarship went to a single mother named Denise, studying to be an electrician. When she told me she almost dropped out because of childcare costs, I knew I had chosen right. In the background, the legal case continued to unfold. Charles and Linda were formally charged for violating the restraining order. The court added financial penalties. They were barred from any future legal contact regarding the will or my estate. And perhaps most satisfying of all, Ms. Lawson, The female lawyer who tried to pressure me during the Christmas party withdrew from the case entirely. Her statement said, "I was not aware of the full context and cannot continue representing clients involved in ethically questionable conduct." She never contacted me, but I didn't need her to. Therapy with Dr. Williams continued every week. One evening, as we closed a session, she said something I wrote on a sticky note and placed on my computer screen. Grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about letting go of who someone should have been. I read it every day, because the hardest part wasn't cutting off Charles or Linda. It was accepting that I never really had a father to begin with, just a man who passed through my life when it served him and disappeared the moment I needed him most. But that's the thing about family. It's not just blood. It's who shows up. And Henry Mitchell showed up every single day of my life. I was beginning to feel safe again. The business was growing steadily. Clients were referring others, and my schedule was finally full. Even my sleep had improved. For the first time in years, I was building a life that felt mine, not borrowed, not inherited, not fought over. Then one evening, I stopped by the local police station to file an update for the restraining order. I had received a strange voicemail from an unknown number, muffled breathing, then a whisper. "You think this is over?" It wasn't directly threatening, but my gut told me it was Charles. As I exited the building into the parking lot, my worst fear came to life. There he was, leaning against his car, arms crossed, wearing that same smug grin he'd worn at the Christmas party. My blood ran cold. He was violating the restraining order, plain and simple. I stopped 10 feet away and said, "You're not supposed to be here." He shrugged. "I'm not technically approaching you, am I? We're just in the same lot. Leave now, or I'll call the officer I just spoke to," I said firmly, pulling out my phone. That's when he snapped. "You think you've won? You think this is all yours forever?" he spat. "You stole everything from me. That money was mine. That house, those investments. You don't deserve any of it. I built that future." I stepped back slowly, keeping my voice calm. "You didn't build anything, Charles. Grandpa did. And he made it very clear who he trusted." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "I'll give you one last chance. Split the inheritance. Give me what's fair, and I'll call it even. Otherwise." He let the word dangle in the air like a threat wrapped in a smirk. I looked him dead in the eyes and replied, "You're not my father anymore. And you never really were." For the first time in my life, I said it out loud. And it felt like a dam finally broke inside me. I turned and walked straight back into the station. 10 minutes later, Officer Rivera, the same woman who'd handled the open house incident, stood with me in the lot as Charles was handcuffed for violating the court order. He didn't say another word as they took him away. That night, I sat in my condo with Grace on speakerphone, sipping tea and staring at the glowing city skyline. "I think that was his last move," she said. "Good," I replied, wrapping Grandpa's quilt tighter around my shoulders. "Because I've got better things to do now." And I did. The next morning, I finalized the new expansion plans for Mitchell Financial Services. A second location. A junior accountant to mentor. More scholarships. More trade students supported. More proof that I wasn't just guarding Grandpa's legacy, I was building on it. Months passed. Charles was formally charged for repeated violations of the restraining order and ordered to undergo mandatory counseling and pay legal penalties. Linda disappeared from the public eye. No more ambushes. No more online smears. Just silence. And for once, I welcomed it. With the noise behind me, I could finally breathe and rebuild. That's when Thomas entered my life. He was a quiet, thoughtful civil engineer I met while working with one of my clients, a small contractor who was expanding into municipal projects. At first, it was all business. He'd ask about invoice structures, contractor tax deductions, bonding requirements. But during a lunch break one Friday, he said, "You know more about the trades than most accountants I've met." I smiled. My grandfather built homes with his hands. I just run the books now. There was something in his expression. Respect, not pity. It was rare. And comforting. We began meeting more often. Lunch turned to coffee. Coffee to weekend walks. I told him my story slowly, one broken piece at a time. About Charles. About Henry. About the Christmas party ambush and the legacy I nearly lost. He listened, never interrupting, never judging. Then one evening, he said something that stayed with me. You didn't just protect a legacy. You carried it forward. That takes more strength than most people ever find. It wasn't long before he became part of my world. Subtle, gentle, never pushing. When he saw how nervous I became around surprise knocks or blocked caller IDs, he didn't tell me to get over it. He helped me set up better locks, a second security camera, and he never asked me to explain my fear. He just made space for it. At the same time, Mitchell Financial Services thrived. I hired my first junior accountant, a Latina CPA who'd put herself through school working construction with her father. Clients loved her. I saw myself in her, young, driven, hungry to prove her worth. The Henry Mitchell Scholarship Fund grew too. We began sponsoring 5 students a year. Plumbers, electricians, HVAC techs. One even came by with tears in her eyes, saying, I would have dropped out this semester if it weren't for this. That moment, that single thank you, was worth more than every dollar in that inheritance. And then came the day Thomas surprised me. We were hiking through the pine-covered trails along Trillium Lake, Grandpa's favorite spot, where he taught me to fish. The sun was setting in gold streaks across the water when Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. I wanted to propose in the one place you feel most safe, he said softly. Inside the box wasn't a diamond, but a stunning sapphire, set into a thin gold band. My heart stopped. I had it reset using your grandmother's ring, he added. Grace told me where to find it. Tears filled my eyes. I nodded before I could even say yes. That night, as I stared at the stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not just from security, but from knowing I had survived and still found room for love. Our wedding was small just as I wanted it. Intimate, meaningful, and far from drama. We held the ceremony right there by Trillium Lake, where Grandpa Henry used to sit in his fishing chair, pointing out the clouds and saying, the best moments in life are the quiet ones. I wore a soft ivory gown and carried a bouquet of lilies, his favorite. Uncle Philip walked me down the aisle. He paused halfway and whispered, your grandfather would be so proud of the woman you've become. Grace stood beside me as my maid of honor, and Aunt Laura sat front row with tears in her eyes. And in the front corner of my bouquet, pinned discreetly, was a tiny charm, a picture of Grandpa. He was with me. He always would be. During the reception, I stood up to give a short toast. My voice trembled, but I spoke with clarity. People ask me if I regret what happened. The truth is, pain taught me boundaries, betrayal taught me strength, and my grandfather, he taught me love. This life isn't just mine. It's the continuation of a man who built with his hands and gave with his heart. And every decision I've made since the day he passed has been to honor that. We danced to one of his favorite records, Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. For once, I believed it. Months later, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was from Charles, postmarked from Arizona. He wrote that he had joined a rehab program after hitting rock bottom. He said he'd gambled away his $50,000 inheritance, faced criminal charges, and had no one left. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote. I probably don't deserve it. But I'm sorry. I see now what I did, and I wish I had seen you, not the money, sooner. Dr. Williams, my therapist, helped me through the storm of feelings that followed. We decided I didn't need to respond immediately, or maybe ever. But eventually I wrote a brief letter back. I said, I wish you well. I truly do. But I am no longer the little girl waiting for her father to love her. I'm someone my grandfather would be proud of, and that's enough for me. I mailed it, and I felt nothing but calm. Now, as I sit in the office of Mitchell Financial Services, looking out at the city skyline, I think about how far I've come. On my wall hangs a framed quote Grandpa kept over his own desk. Legacy isn't what you leave for someone, it's what you leave in them. And what he left in me was strength, integrity, and a heart capable of rebuilding, even after it's been broken. Thomas and I are planning our honeymoon next spring, somewhere coastal, quiet, and full of soft mornings. The scholarship fund has expanded to include women returning to school after domestic trauma. We've created resource kits and financial literacy webinars. And each time I see a young student submit their application, I think, Grandpa would have loved this. I don't fear knocks on the door anymore. I don't shrink at my father's name. I don't feel guilty for protecting what was entrusted to me. Because now I know, the greatest act of love isn't giving everything away, it's honoring what was earned, protected, and passed on with purpose. And I'll do that every day for the rest of my life. If Rebecca's journey inspired you, or if you've ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it meant going against your own family, then you already know how powerful reclaiming your voice can be. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever protected your peace by walking away from a toxic situation? Like this video if you believe legacy is built through love and courage. Subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that remind us just how strong we really are. And don't forget to share this story with someone who might need it today. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and always choose your peace.